Hello everyone. So today I'm going to be talking about some new Nars products. So what I have here are a few items from what they are calling their Summer Seductive line for 2024. So this includes this palette, which is called the Ultimate Face Palette, and this includes a couple of bronzers and a highlighter and some eyeshadows. And then in addition, I have one of their new eyeshadow sticks, and I'm kind of excited about that because I am a fan of eyeshadow crayons, and I do like this one. And then in addition, I have a couple of new shades of their reformulated blush. So I talked about some of these in my previous video, but I picked up a couple more shades, including one that is called Forbidden, that I really haven't seen anyone talk about, and that is available only online. And then towards the end of the video, I will be doing a quick makeup look using all Nars products. So first, a little bit of information about me. I'm 59 years old, and I do have dry and very sensitive skin. And over the past 3 years, I've tried more than 1,000 makeup products, and so I feel like I do have a pretty good basis of comparison for everything that I try here. And one thing that I have found is that there are certain ingredients that always do irritate my skin, and I know that these are irritating for many other people as well, so I just don't talk about products with those ingredients on this channel. And so Nars is a brand that I didn't used to be able to use at all because everything that I tried from them was irritating for my skin, and really everything had some ingredients in it that I knew were problematic for me. But what has happened since the beginning of 2022 is that really everything that they have introduced has been fine for me in terms of both what the ingredient list looks like, in terms of also how it performs on my skin, in terms of being a fun product to use, and also in terms of not irritating my skin. So I've been really happy about that, and I've been really impressed at how Nars has been able to really create what I think are really clean products and that are appropriate for me and for many other people with sensitive skin, but without even bringing that up. Now, in general, as I say, I'm a big fan of eyeshadow sticks. I like the fact that they can go on so quickly and that I don't need to put a primer down. And I do like to use some kind of an eyeshadow on my eyes just to cover up the darkness that has emerged since I have gotten older, and sometimes to add a little bit of fun to my look. But I would prefer that it be really quick and that it only take a couple seconds per eye if possible. And in a lot of cases, eyeshadow sticks work really well for me with regard to that, because they don't take very long to go on, and I can usually just smear them around with my finger a little bit, and they kind of look nice, and they usually will last for quite a long time. So as I say, I have found that most of the Nars products that I have tried have worked out really, really well for me. So I am really excited about these eyeshadow sticks as well, and I was kind of hopeful that they might work out. However, there were really only 3 of the 8 shades that they have that I thought would be really appropriate for me. So there were 3 shades that were more on the kind of neutral side, not too dark. And then all the rest of them were quite dark. One of them is actually black, and they seem to be expecting that you're going to put black all over your whole eyelid. So I thought that was a little bit on the odd side. The other 4 of them that are on the dark side, I thought they were probably going to be too dark for me as well. I might be able to buy one of the ones with like the brown in them and then smear it around a little bit. But in general, I kind of prefer that the stuff that I put on my eyes is not quite so dark. But there are 3 shades that I do think have some potential. So one of them is a shade that's called Oblivion, which they are describing as a caramel. And that one I have really liked quite a lot, and so therefore that does make me really interested in getting the other 2 shades that would be appropriate for me. So these include one that is called Don't Touch, which is described as a matte milk tea brown. So I think of that one as kind of being a cool taupe. It almost looks like it has leans almost like very slightly purple, but it's definitely cool. And then there's one that's called Adults Only, which is a matte apricot, and I think that that would be really, really pretty with my complexion, and I think that it would have gone really well with this bronzy type look that I'm going for today. So I'm kind of interested in both of those. Now, I have tried this eyeshadow on a number of times so far, and I have been really happy with it in general. I do think it has gone on really easily. I do think it looks nice on my complexion, and I think it lasts for quite a long time. I think that these are supposed to last for a bit longer than some of the eyeshadow sticks that are out there, and I feel like that it has held up really well. Now, what I will say is that I do watch a channel called Not Fit for French Beauty, and Rebecca on that channel said that she ordered 3 of these sticks, and then one of them was damaged when she received it, and that the pencil fell off and it was like inside the cap. And that is something that happened to me with some of the Victoria Beckham eyeshadow sticks. That my most recent order, I was kind of excited about them because there were some pretty colors, but 2 of them were actually damaged upon arrival. And with one of my other Victoria Beckham sticks, the one that was in the neutral trench color, that one I used a few times, and within a month or so of my purchasing it, it just fell apart into 3 different pieces, and I really wasn't able to use that one much more. But of course, Victoria Beckham did replace them, and I'm sure that Nars would replace them if you purchased something through mail order and it was damaged. So what I guess that my conclusion here is that eyeshadow sticks are not necessarily the most durable form of makeup that you might buy. Now, I never had any problems at all with any of my Laura Mercier ones, and I never had any problems with any of the Bobbi Brown ones, and I have quite a lot of those. And so I don't know if these are inferior formulas or if we just got unlucky. But in any case, I would like to have some reports from other people on this in terms of whether this has happened to them. But in general, I do think that when it comes to performance, that these eyeshadow sticks are really easy and fun to use, and that they do create a really nice look. And I think that especially now that more intricate eyeshadow looks are not as much in fashion and people seem to be reaching for more really simple looks, that eyeshadow sticks like this can be a really positive thing. So I can see why there's so many that are being released, and I think that it would be a good idea for me to do a full video on a variety of eyeshadow sticks, because there are an awfully lot out there, and I have been trying out a whole bunch of them recently. Now, I did also want to mention that there are a few new shades that have been released in the Nars Powermatte lip pencils. And these are called lip pencils, but they really are like lip crayons, and they're more like a matte lipstick than anything else. So they go on a little more precisely than some lipsticks, so that is actually really nice, but they're also quite creamy and quite pigmented. And they're not as drying as the Nars Powermatte lipsticks, and they don't last for quite as long as the Nars Powermatte lipsticks. But I do think that they last quite long on my lips, and I think that they are really attractive. And sometimes I put gloss over them and sometimes not, but I think that either way they're really attractive. And there's one in that line in particular that I would like to get, which is called Viva Las Vegas, which is supposed to be a kind of apricot type color that I thought would be really good with my complexion. So I wish I had picked that one up already to share in this video, but I think that I would suggest taking a look at the new shades if you are interested in that particular product. And I really feel like this is one of my favorite lip products, and that they have really been overlooked and people have not talked about these nearly enough. And so the new shades in this one, in addition to the Viva Las Vegas one, there's one that is called All Night Long, which is supposed to be a rose brown. And there's one that's called Midnight Rider, which is described as a bright classic red. And so now let's talk about the Summer Bronzing Palette. And so this collection is available in 2 different versions. And so there's one that's the version 2, which is obviously for much darker skin than mine. And then there is this one, which I still think is primarily maybe designed for people with like medium or medium tan skin, but that I was hoping that I would be able to use too. So this one has 2 different bronzers in it, and let's talk about bronzers first. And the 2 bronzers that are in this are first one that is called O2, and this was the original Laguna bronzer when they only had 1 of them. And they are describing this as being for light medium skin, and it is supposed to have a neutral undertone. And then there is one here that is supposed to have a warmer undertone that is supposed to be more for like medium to tan skin, and it has supposedly more of a warm undertone, they say. So I tend to be really careful with regard to not getting sun exposure, so I tend to avoid going out in the midday sun, and I also am really careful to wear a really good sun hat when I go outside. So I would say that my skin really doesn't get too much darker during the summer as it is during the winter, and it's actually not that much darker than any of the covered skin on my body. And so when it gets to be the middle of summer, I do feel like my skin is looking awfully pale, and that having a little bit of a tan would be really pretty and more appropriate. And so I'm kind of trying to simulate the idea of having a tan with my bronzer. And I will just take a little bit of the bronzer and I will kind of use it more diffusely over the entire top half of my face, and even sometimes a little tiny bit on the bottom, but more along the cheekbones and more along the bridge of the nose. So areas where I would get sun in the real world if I were really getting very much sun exposure. And so I would like for it to be basically the same color that my skin would be when it was tanned, except maybe possibly a little bit more on the reddish side to simulate the idea of having a really mild sunburn. And so if that's the kind of look that you're going for something that's that diffuse, then I think that what you really need is something that's going to be a really good, almost exact match in terms of the undertone, because when you're going for something that's darker, what it tends to do is really, if the undertone is wrong, then it really kind of sticks out. So I think if you want to find a good bronzer shade for you, and particularly if you're trying to find one that's going to give you an overall darkened look to your skin, then understanding your skin undertone is probably even more important than it is for foundation. So what I have found is that if I pick a foundation, for instance, that is just labeled as neutral, then in a lot of cases I feel like it just kind of makes me look washed out, and that it kind of takes away sort of all of my coloring, even if in terms of the depth of the color it's supposed to be the right color for me. And that if I have one that is labeled peach, that in a lot of cases it seems to work a lot better for me. And I think that the reason for that is because it's not just that I have a lot of yellow in my skin or a lot of pink in my skin, but I actually feel like I have a lot of both of those colors in my skin. So what I have tended to find is that bronzers that do have somewhat of a peachiness to them in terms of the undertone, that those two tend to look really natural on me, and they allow me to use a lot more without it looking fake. So I say all that because I want to have some context for my experiences with the Nars bronzer line. And so I have two bronzers from them already, and then I have these two new bronzers that are in that kit. So the ones that I have, the first one is called 00. So this is really one of the lightest bronzers that is in my collection. And this one, I think, tends to be kind of on the gray side, and it tends to be not much darker than my complexion, but I don't feel like it's a really good match. I feel like it really doesn't have that peachiness to it, and it does look kind of on the gray side. And then the other one that I have here is the Laguna 01, and this one is a little bit more peachy. I do think this is a somewhat better match for me, and they are describing this as warm. And that 01 shade, that one I think is supposed to be for people with light to light medium skin tones, and I have been able to wear that one. I wouldn't say that that one is the best one in my collection, but it does have a tiny bit of peachiness to it, and I think it doesn't look terrible on my skin, especially if I don't put too much on. And then what I will say about these other two shades, the 02 was their original shade, and I will say that I don't think that when I put this on my skin that I was able to use it at all. I think that the undertone is way off, and so even when I was putting it on really, really light, I feel like it was way off in terms of it looking just wrong on my skin. I think that not only doesn't this have any peachiness to it, but I think it has a little bit of grayishness to it, and I also think it has a little bit, just a tiny bit of a greenish color. Now, I swatched it against the RMS Tan Lines, which I know has greenish in it because it's quite an obvious greenish, and Rosemary Swift actually did say that they purposely put some green in that one. And I can't wear that Tan Line ones at all except as an eyeshadow. And this one I feel like is not as green as that one, but it's still leaning a lot more green than would be appropriate for my skin. So I think if you had a more neutral undertone than I did, and maybe an olive undertone, that it might work really well. So I think that there is potential for this to be used sort of as an overall bronzer, just not on my skin. And then this one, which is 04, this one claims to be warm, but I feel like this one is one of those bronzers that makes me look really sunburned. So I think it has a little bit more reddishness to it. If I just use it as a blush, then I think it can look a little bit bronzy and attractive, but I have to be really restrained with it. And if I use too much of it, it starts to look just a little bit too brown and too red and almost like a little bit on the purplish side. And I think that for people that have darker skins, that kind of bronzer can be really attractive. But for my skin, it just really starts to look too much, too fast, especially if I use it in a more diffuse way. Now, one thing that I will say is that I think that Nars, even though they are saying that this is a bronzer, that they are encouraging people to use it more as being like a contour. Because actually in the description, what they are saying to do with this bronzer is to take it and put it like just under your cheekbone. So that's much more like a contour than a bronzer, in my opinion. And I think that explains a little bit why these have a little bit more of a grayishness to it, because if you're using it like a contour and you're trying to sculpt your face and to make your cheekbones look more prominent, then it certainly makes sense to use a gray in it, because shadows do come across as a bit gray. And so if you want a kit like this that is going to allow you to do some contouring to your face, then this could be one to choose. And I think that that's why these shades are in this kit. And I think that probably for me, if my goal was to contour my face, that maybe I would be able to sort of get away with these colors a little bit better. But I really am not interested in contouring my face, so that is not something that I am going to be doing with this. But I do think that it kind of explains why they picked these particular colors for this kit. And so now let's talk about the eyeshadows. And there are 4 shades in here that are designated to be used as eyeshadows. So I will tell you what Nars says about all 4 of those shades. So the first one is Unwind, and that one is described as a matte peach pink. Then there is one that's called Spritz, which is described as a shimmery rose gold. There is one that is called Heat Spell, which they describe as a satin rust brown. And then there is one that is called Sizzle, which they describe as a shimmer yellow gold. And then as the highlighter, there is just a plain, sort of a champagne color highlighter. And they are calling that Drift Away. So what I will say about these eyeshadows is that with regard to my generally peach complexion, that these are all shades that are very wearable for me. And that especially if these were actually in larger pans and I could use them on my face easily, that I would probably get a lot of use out of them. Because I think that this pink shade here, this peachy pink shade, this is very close to the Orgasm Blush that they make, but it's a little bit more muted. And I think that that is a really pretty color on my skin, and that I really kind of like the fact that it's a little bit more muted, but still has a definite color to it. And then this shade here, which is sort of a bronzy type color with a little bit of reddishness to it. I think I could actually pull that off as a bronzer that would be on my cheeks, and that would be a really pretty color as well for the summer. And then the this color here, the shimmery color, I think that works fine on my eyes, but I think it could also be a really nice highlighter. And then that yellow highlighter, you know, yellow gold like that, that's a little bit harder for me to wear, but I think I would be able to get some use out of that more as a highlighter than I do as eyeshadows. So the thing about eyeshadows for me is that I am like a little bit wary about wearing pinks. I feel like even if they're pinks like this, which are not obviously the same color as my eyes being irritated, I feel like they're not giving sort of the healthiest look to my eyes. And I feel like all four of these shades are kind of on the dark side as well. And that they're not really designed to make a look that I feel like is really flattering to my eye color in particular, and I feel like it's bringing an awfully lot of pinkish, reddish type color to my eyes, and that I feel like those colors are really do better for me when they're on my cheeks and my lips, and for my eyes, I feel like they tend to look better if I am wearing things like browns or greens, or sometimes even blues. And when I get into the pinks, that's a little bit harder. Now, actually, if I compare that eyeshadow with the Nars Orgasm, here are those two shades, so you can see that the Orgasm is actually quite a bit brighter and a bit pinker, and that this one is much more on the muted, sort of corally, beigey type of side, and I really, really like that color. But putting it on my face with it being in this tiny little palette, that's a little bit more of a challenge. Now, as I said, I watched a video from Not Fit for Print Beauty where she talked about her problems with the eyeshadow. And Rebecca had her mother on the program, and her mother definitely has cool skin that's somewhat darker than mine, and it looks like it might have some olive in it. And she seemed to do fine with the lighter shade of this bronzer in this palette. It actually looked nice on her. I wonder if her skin is a little bit on the greenish side. But when it came to these eyeshadows, she said that she thought that they looked horrible on her. And I kind of agree that for someone with her color skin, that these color peaches were really not appropriate in terms of the way they were blending into the skin. So it's not just with me where they're bright colors, or colors that are a little too dark for what I would prefer in terms of a look, but they actually seem to be not really coordinating very well with her skin. So what I kind of feel like is that I'm sure there are some people that can wear this palette, but I think that it seems like there are a lot of people that may have difficulties wearing this palette because of the specific colors that they chose. So this seems to be a little bit different of an issue than what I've seen with Nars in the past. So I feel like in the past there have been some circumstances where Nars has released palettes that everyone says that they have seen before and that they weren't interested in because they were looking too repetitive. And I have seen some cases where Nars has created palettes that seem to be specifically targeted towards people with light skin or people with darker skin. But in this case, they have two different palettes, so I would be hoping that they would be covering a spectrum of people with different skin tones from light to dark. But it still seems like there's an awfully lot of people that are not going to be able to use this palette just because of the undertone situation and because of the specific colors that they chose. I'm sure there's some people out there that can use it, but I kind of feel like the way to develop a good palette that is going to be have a lot of broad appeal is to be able to pick colors that are going to have a lot of appeal to a lot of different skin tones, and maybe also to have some shades in there that can be used for both face and eyes, so that if you're like me, for instance, and you don't want to use those colors on your eyes, you can still use some of them on your face. And in this case, I don't feel like that palette is designed for that at all. So I feel a little bit sad about all of this just because I really do like the Nars formulas so much, and I think that they're all really pretty shades in and of themselves. I just wish that I could use them better, and obviously I'm not a makeup artist, but I did put a bit of a time into trying to figure out how I could use that palette, and that's why I looked at another video about this palette to see if I was missing anything. But I think that it's just kind of a little bit unfortunate because I kind of doubt that I will get a lot of use out of this, and I'm not even sure who to give it to. Now, one of the reasons that I was actually really excited about this new palette from Nars is because last year Nars introduced a Laguna eyeshadow palette that I did get a lot of use out of and that I did really enjoy and that I did think was really appropriate for me. So there were two different versions of this palette. One had some corally pink in it, and I did not get that one. But I just got this one that was more neutral, and it has a lot of like shimmery, warm type shades to it. And I thought that this one worked really, really well on my face, and that it really was something that I was able to use a lot, and that especially considering that it looks kind of on the boring side, that it actually turned out to be really pretty. So that's what I put on my eyes today, and I bring this up because this is actually still for sale on the Nars website, at least as of when I'm filming this video, and it was on 40% off sale, and I think this is really a terrific palette. And so now let's talk about those blush colors. And in general, I tend to like blush looks that are a little bit more muted. And my skin is fairly light, so it's kind of on the borderline between being fair and light on most foundation lines. And so I tend to be much more interested in blush that also is fairly muted and that is not going to be really something that I'm going to have to fight with in order to keep it from looking too garish. So of the blush that Nars is now offering, they have two shades that I think that people that are interested in shimmery shades might be interested in, and you may already know both of those shades. So one of those is the regular Orgasm shade, which is a peachy pink, and it has a lot of gold shimmer in it. And then there is one that is called Deep Throat, which is more like just a plain pink shade with a lot of gold shimmer in it. And I think that a lot of people are familiar with those, and I am starting to kind of feel like those are a little bit overdone in terms of how much we have seen those, and that they're starting to look a little bit out of style, and that more matte shades in the Nars line are starting to feel kind of a little bit more appealing to me. And so those are the ones that I've been focused on. And so I looked through all the shades and I picked up all of the ones that I thought would be appropriate for people with light skin, except for one that was really, really cool that I was both out of stock when I last looked at the Nars website, and that also I didn't think would be that appropriate for my own skin tone. So Nars has one blush shade that is very, very light. It's actually lighter than really any blush that I have seen from any other company. And that one is called Sex Appeal, and it is described as a pale, soft matte peach. And I think that it's more of like a peachy pink rather than a plain peach, but it definitely is very, very light. And what I have heard is that there are some Korean TikTokers or maybe YouTube influencers that have really very light skin who have been really enthusiastic about this particular shade. And so I think that if you have really, really light skin, if you're the type of person that has like really pale skin and freckles, or you just have really light skin in general, that maybe this could be used as a muted type of a blush. I think that for me, if I use it even as the way that I would like to use a bronzer, sort of more diffusely over my whole face, it doesn't really make my face look like it's any more bronzed, but I think it does work reasonably well as sort of like a setting powder. So I have become really interested in pink powders, because I think that if I put a little bit of pink powder on top of my makeup, that it simulates the look of there being just a tiny bit more blood flow on top of my skin, and it makes me look a little bit younger. And I think that this one works sort of similarly to the other pink powders that I've tried. So for instance, Jones Road makes a nice pink powder, and for instance, Pat McGrath recently came out with the pink powder. And I think this one actually doesn't work too bad as a powder. You know, this actually has kale and clay in it, so it is a little bit drying. So I actually have been getting some use out of this as a pink powder from time to time. And then the second shade that I have, this is called Behave, and this is described as a matte pink mauve, but it is very, very muted. I think that this one does have quite a bit of a grayishness to it, and that it is quite light. And this one I actually feel like I can use as a bronzer. So I feel like this one is actually a little bit closer to my skin than really any of the bronzers that Nars is making, and it's really closer to my skin than most of the bronzers, and that if I use it fairly diffusely on the top half of my face and on my chin, or really anywhere on my face, that it really just looks like very similar to what my skin actually would look like if I had gotten a little bit of sun. Now, I actually have been using either a muted peach or a muted mauve type of a color in terms of a powder blush in the way that I would use a bronzer for a while now. But recently I was very interested to see that Bobbi Brown from Jones Road came out with a line of bronzers, and that their lightest shade was one that was actually a really muted mauve type of a color. And that one is called Dusty Rose. And I think that this one is actually quite similar to the Behave shade, but at least with my skin tone, I think that the Behave works a lot better for me. So I guess what I will do is just show you this on my hand swatched, and I will compare that one to the Behave shade. And I have the Dusty Rose one here, and then the Behave one here. And I think that the Behave one really does just blend into my skin almost seamlessly. And I feel like the Dusty Rose one is quite a little bit more cool, I guess. It doesn't have that peachiness to it. It's more like a pinkish color. So if your skin is very pink, then I think that that one might be a lot better. But I think that in terms of my skin tone, that this one actually works quite nicely as a bronzer. And so I am really happy that I picked that up, because so far of the bronzers that I have found, this is one of the ones that I like the most if I want to get kind of a very slight but natural look. And then another shade that is very light and that is pretty much just peach, plain straightforward peach, is called Gina. And this one is shown in the Nars website just being demonstrated on people with light or fair skin, so they are not suggesting that that one can be worn on people with darker skin at all. And I don't think this one has too much pink to it. I think that this one is really just more like a straightforward peach. And so if I'm looking for a peach look, then this is one that I think is very nice. And then one of their newest shades that they just introduced a month or two ago is called Forbidden. And this one, I haven't seen this being displayed at Ulta, and it's not even sold on Sephora, even on the website. So I haven't really seen anybody talking about this, but I think it's a kind of a pretty color. I think it's a little bit brighter than the color of the Gina one, and it's a little bit pinker, and I think it's a very nice, pretty shade on me. And that's the one that I used today as more like a pop of color on my cheeks, and I think that that one also blends in nicely with my skin, and that I really like the way that that looks on me. So I think that that is one that I will get a fair amount of use out of as well, even though it's a little brighter. And then the one that is the Orgasm Edge, this is the color of their original Orgasm, which is a peachy pink type of a color. And this one is more pink than the Forbidden one, and it is even brighter, I think. So I think that if you have liked the Orgasm color, but if you have been thinking that maybe it would be nice if it were a little bit less pink and a little bit more peach, then the Forbidden one could be a good one to try out. But I think that this Orgasm Edge one is nice for me too. I kind of like the way that this looks, especially depending on what I'm wearing. If I'm wearing something that's a little bit more pinkish color, then this is a good one to choose. And then finally, there is a color that is called Thrill, and that is described as a cool light pink. And it's pretty bright, and it almost has a little bit of a lavender type of an edge to it because it is so cool. And I don't think that that color necessarily looks that great on me, but if you are the kind of person that likes that color, and it is very popular right now, then that would be one to consider, I think. And so now I want to just insert some footage that I took earlier today of me putting on this quick makeup look, and I will talk about each of the products that I used. And most of the products are from Nars, but the first one that I'm putting on is not from Nars. This one is from Jones Road. And I am really enthusiastic about this brow pencil from Jones Road because it is something that I can put on really, really fast when I'm in a hurry. So this pencil has little fibers in it, and the fibers make it look more like real brows rather than just that my brows are drawn on, and so I don't feel it necessary to use a brow gel along with this one, and it goes on very, very fast. And then this is a fairly new product that is called the Nars Light Reflecting Eye Brightener. So this is a quite pale product, and it's a little bit reflective. And so if I weren't wearing a foundation, then I don't think that this is a really good product for me at all. But if I am wearing a foundation and I put this down and then I put a foundation over it, I think it actually works pretty well. So I do have a lot of darkness under my eyes, and if I put this under my eyes and then I put the foundation over it, I think it does lighten things up quite a lot. And it is a very nice product. I really like the formula. It hasn't been irritating at all. And I have the shade called Night Swan, which is quite light. That's their lightest shade. I thought about going up to a slightly darker shade, but all of those are starting to look on the yellow side, and I'm not sure that yellow does that great of a job of covering up my dark circles. And I do think that this works quite well for me as long as I've got foundation over it. And then the foundation from Nars that was released maybe 2 years ago is the Light Reflecting Foundation. And this is a non-silicone foundation, and I have found that it has been fine in terms of not irritating my skin. And I do think it's a very nice foundation. I do think it's just a little bit too much coverage for me. I don't really need that coverage, and I don't think it's nearly as bad even if I use it at full strength in terms of settling into my wrinkles as many foundations. But I think that if I mix it about half and half with a moisturizer, I think that that works really well on my skin. I think it does cover up a lot of whatever issues I might have, and most of the issues that I have are pretty mild except for the under eye circles. And that it looks a lot more glowy and a lot more kind of radiant and doesn't cause me to have those exacerbation of my wrinkles. So I do like this particular foundation, and I've had this since it came out, so almost 2 years, and it seems to be holding up pretty well. I don't feel like I have the exact right color in this one. I think this one's a little bit too yellow. This one is Salzburg, so I think that pretty soon I will probably buy another bottle of this, and I'll probably get a slightly different shade. And then this is a product that I only started trying out a few weeks ago, and this is called the Nars Soft Matte Advanced Perfecting Powder, something like that. So this is a powder that is designed to be a setting powder, and it is supposed to be a little bit oil absorbing, and it is supposed to decrease the look of pores, and it has a little bit of niacinamide in it. And I think that if I'm not wearing a foundation, I would never wear this, both because I think it absorbs too much oil and also because it has some preservatives in it that I don't think are really great to put right on my skin. But if I am wearing a foundation, and especially one that has moisturizing in it or that I've mixed moisturizer into it, and then I put this on the top, I think that this is not bad at all. I think that this does a nice job, and I think it kind of looks pretty. And I think that it's even though it's getting warm outside, and so it's a little bit warm in my house, and I have this one ring light on, I still feel like it's doing a pretty good job of keeping my face from being really sweaty, even under these increasingly more difficult conditions. And then, as I said, I put on that Behave as a bronzer, and I think that that is actually looks very natural on me. I feel really comfortable with that, and I feel like if I put on more of it, that it continues to look nice. So that is something that, again, I think I'm going to keep that one out and to use that periodically throughout the summer, especially in the early summer when I feel like I just want a little bit of color to my face that looks like I've gotten a little bit of sun, rather than trying to actually make myself look tanned. And then I used this new eyeshadow stick, and again, this is in the color Oblivion, and I think that this is a very pretty color. It's supposed to be like a caramel color, and caramel colors in eyeshadows do tend to look really nice on me, and I think this one has worked out well. And I think that this has really held up very well for me, and I think it does serve also as a really good base for eyeshadow. And so it's something that I feel like I can put on. I don't have to put anything else on with it, and I think it actually looks really nice with nothing else on with it. But when I added a little bit more of the powder eyeshadow to it, I think that that looked nice together also. And I certainly could have used the eyeshadows from the new Face palette on my eyes, and I could use just a tiny little bit of them on top of this particular eyeshadow pencil in particular. But I thought that since this particular palette was on sale that I would just try it on for you guys so that you could see what it looks like. I'm not sure I ever really put it on camera before. And I do think that this actually is a really pretty summer look. And I especially like the fact that one of the colors in the palette, the medium brown shade, I think that that one serves as kind of a casual eyeliner, so it's something that I can put a little bit of it under my eyes. It's a matte shade, and I think especially as kind of like a day look, I think this is a really pretty day look. It just has a little bit of a shimmer to it, but it's not too dark, and it kind of does look summery to me, in my opinion. And this one, of course, does have 3 shimmery shades in it, but they're only mildly shimmery, and they do have a little bit of that goldy, bronzy type of look that I think is quite pretty and that really goes with almost anything. And I would say that of the eyeshadow palettes that I have, I've used this one an awfully lot. I was really surprised. And then I tried putting on some of that Forbidden blush, and I think that that kind of went well with the shirt that I'm wearing, so that was part of the reason that I wanted to use that. But I think it's just kind of a pretty summery color. It's not totally peach colored, but it does have a little bit more of that peachy type of a color to it that I think is really pretty in the summer. And then in terms of my lips, as I say, Nars did introduce a few new shades of their lip pencils, and I really would like to pick one of those up, especially if I can happen to see it in advance to make sure that I actually like the shade that I'm thinking about. But the one that I do have that I thought would be okay with this look is called Born to be Wild, and so I put some of that on. And then over the top of that, I have some of the lip gloss from Nars, and I thought that it would be nice to have a little bit more of a shimmery look to go with the blush. And so I just put a little bit of that lip gloss on the top of it in the shade Orgasm. And I think that because it has this darker shade underneath it, it doesn't really look as old-fashioned as it looks like on its own when there's just the pink color and that gold shimmer. And then in terms of mascara, the brown mascara that I have open right now is from YSL, and this one is called Lash Clash. And this is designed to be a mascara that gives you an awfully lot of volume, and that's not always really the kind of mascara that I like the most, especially because it tends to be a little bit hard to control. And I do feel that when I put that on today, it did kind of make a mess, and I got a great big clump on my eyes. But I was able to sort of remove it with my fingers, and I do like this mascara because it is very gentle. It won an Allure Clean Beauty Award, and I was a little bit perplexed by that last year when it won that award, but it actually has been fine for me. It's held up well for me when I've been sweating. It's or had been a little bit teary because of, say, the wind or rain, that it has really held up well on my eyes. It hasn't been caused any irritation at all. I think it has been reasonably easy to remove. So once I actually get it on my eyes, I kind of like it, and it does give a lot of volume. But I probably wouldn't buy this one again just because it's kind of annoying, and what I really want is a mascara that's more like a tubing mascara. But I will say that this is a very pretty color brown, and that I wish that the companies that I really like that make tubing mascaras, like for instance Caloray, would come out with a brown version. And in a lot of cases, what I've been feeling is that blush tends to be something that I kind of like to layer. So if I can put on some powder blush and then I put on some kind of a cream blush over the top of it, I usually like the way that that looks, and I also think it lasts a lot longer than just using one kind of blush. And so in this case, I took a little bit of the Nars Afterglow liquid blush, and I just have the shade Orgasm in that. But I just put a little tiny bit on, and I think that in combination with the other blush that I like this Orgasm shade a lot better. It just has a very mild amount of that gold shimmer to it, and I think it looks kind of natural and just kind of pretty on my cheeks. And one thing that I do kind of like about this look is that even though I put on a lot of different kinds of makeup, really none of them took any time at all to put on. The foundation went on so easily because I thinned it down a little bit with the moisturizer, and really all of the steps went on really easily. The only one that was a little bit annoying was that mascara, which was really kind of unnecessary. There are many better mascaras in the world. And so I think that that's one thing that I like about these products, is that they perform so well that it is pretty easy to get a really pretty and attractive look. So thank you very much for watching all the way to the end of the video. And if you have tried any Nars products, then please share your experiences with them with me. And also, if you are or are not interested in that palette that I talked about, then please share that information. And also, if you haven't subscribed yet to the channel, then I hope you will go ahead and do that. And Coco and I love you very much, so thank you very much for watching. Goodbye.